I want to get very, very real with my audience today. There is a concerted effort to create a significant amount of violence in our streets today. There's an actual goal, an actual push to create more violence in our streets. It is an actual goal by Democrat leadership. This is not imaginary. It is not fictitious. It is not made up. This is an actual goal to create as much violence as possible in the streets. We have stated many times in our podcasts that the only goal of the left is to stay in power, to create such chaos in the streets that the people demand that it be fixed. And then they come in as the saviors and say, we can fix the chaos, we can fix the violence. You need to elect more power to us and give us more power so we can fix it. That has always been the goal of the left. The other method they've always used to try to stay in power is illegal aliens. They're trying to import their voters and buy those voters with free stuff. That means free SNAP benefits, free health insurance, all this free stuff. And I'm going to prove this stuff here in this video. Now, what we're seeing right now with the government shutdown is projection. And with violence in the streets, what we're seeing is projection. Everything that the left is guilty of doing, they project it onto the right and say, no, we're not doing it. They are. You are. And they spin those stories and they get it into the 24-hour media news cycle and they get it up on social media, and then their base, hook, line, and sinker, eats into that and just pushes it out there to where they get a lot of people buying into this idea that the right is doing what they themselves are doing. And that is the danger that we're seeing right now. That is the danger that many people are buying into this false narrative, into this evil, and allowing them to usurp this power for themselves and push more and more violence towards conservatism, towards Christianity, towards MAGA, towards Trump supporters. But they're doing it in a way to where they skirt that line, to where they get as close as that, into that gray area as far as possible, that line that between black and white is as close as possible to it, so that they themselves are not liable for the words that they are saying. That way, when their base actually goes out and creates this violence and actually acts out upon the rhetoric that they have been spewing, they can stand back and say, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't create that violence. I didn't say go out there and shoot that person. I didn't say go out and throw rocks at that people or destroy that property. We're completely against that. We're completely against all that violence. And we saw that with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk gets shot, and they all come out and say, no, we abhor violence. We're completely against violence. That's not what the left stands for. But yet a week later, they're back out with the same exact rhetoric that created the violence that got Charlie Kirk shot in the first place. They're out there with the same rhetoric that has all these leftist rioters out there rioting and trying to harm our law enforcement, our ICE agents, our Border Patrol agents, police officers, and all that. It is a purposeful act to be able to project that and then spin it to make it look like the right is doing it. So let's give you some examples. Government shutdown. We're going into week 5 of the government shutdown. And the left is trying to project that and say, no, the right is responsible for this shutdown. It is their fault that the government is shut down. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, they have the Supreme Court. See, they should be able to get the government opened back up. Yes. And they push and they push and they push these false narratives, say, hey, we're not in power, we're not controlling this, because they know the public is just enough or has just enough ignorance to know or think that the right is the one that's creating it, that the We are in power, and why isn't the government opened up? Why aren't we negotiating? Why are we trying to take insurance away from the poor? Why are we trying to take SNAP benefits away from the poor? And they create these lies, and they are absolute lies. I mean, it is so disgusting how blatant these lies are that they should probably be taken out of office. I mean, they should probably be brought up on charges and taken out of our office for the extreme nature of these lies. Because the CR that is in front of them is perfectly clean. There's nothing in it that hasn't been passed 13, 14 times before over the past few years. And they know that. The problem they have is in the past, when they passed these CRs, they had more power in Congress. They had more power in the House of Representatives. They had more power in the Senate, so that they knew that they could pass a clean CR and still come back around and push insurance for illegal aliens, SNAP benefits for illegal aliens, and all these other programs, these foreign aid programs that filter money back to their own coffers. They had enough power in the House and in the Senate that they could still pass a clean CR and get all that done. The difference now is they do not have that power anymore. They do not have the House or the Senate or any way to negotiate. So if they were to pass a clean CR, they are afraid that we couldn't come back and renegotiate these other things because we do not have enough power to get them negotiated. They probably wouldn't even make it out of committee because we do not have enough people to get them out of committee and get them out on the floor to vote for. And even if they made it to the floor, they'd probably be voted down because Republicans control the House and control the Senate and the White House. So if we don't get it now, if we don't get our way now, we'll never get it. That is why they're so hard lining this clean CR and keeping the government shut down. Because going back to their main goal is power. And since they don't have the House, they don't have the Senate, they don't have the presidency, they don't have the Supreme Court, the only way for them to get that power is by future elections, which means they have to have all these illegals path to citizenship so they can be voting. They have to have all these illegals so they can pad their census records and get more legislation so they can be in power. They have to blame the right for redistricting states unfairly when they have done that for years. There was recently an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger that pointed this fact out, where he was up, I think he was on MSNBC or CNN, and he pointed out to the news anchor, says, you're wrong, because if you look at Massachusetts, 40% of Massachusetts voted Republican, and not a single Republican representative went to Congress. It's 100% Democrat. New Mexico, 45% of the state voted Republican. They don't have a single Republican representative in Congress, none. That is unfair. That is having an entire population that is unrepresented, which is what they've been projecting this whole time and saying, no, you're defranchising a whole group of people. Again, they're projecting onto the right what they themselves are doing. They have entire demographics that are completely disenfranchised, completely unrepresented, and they know that in these deep blue states. California, Gavin Newsom is trying to do this pervasively. As we pointed out a couple weeks ago in one of our podcasts, where they are trying to redistrict, where right now, about 40-45% of the state is Republican. And they're trying to gerrymander it so that 90 to 95% of the representation coming from that state is Democrat. That the 40-45% of Republicans only have one representative or two representatives, period, in Congress. that completely disenfranchises the entire Republican population, completely. But then they refer over to Texas saying, well, you're gerrymandering it over in Texas. But yet Texas, even with the redistricting, still has fair representation, to where the number of Democrats in that state and the number of representatives that are actually going to Congress are probably within about 10 points of each other. Not the skiwampus numbers that you're finding in Massachusetts and New Mexico, or what they're trying to push in California, or what has happened in Wisconsin, Minnesota, to where they are heavily left, and the senators, the congressmen, everybody that's sent to Congress from that state is left, even though these states have a 40-45% population that is Republican, that is right, that are completely disenfranchised, not represented at all. That is a massive population that is not represented. We're talking millions of people that are not represented. You look at the population of California, I mean, LA alone has, 16 million people in LA alone? And you're saying within the suburbs of Los Angeles and in around Orange County and in these other counties where you do have a large Republican population, it may not be the majority, but there's still a large Republican population in the millions. They could be 10 plus million in some of these, or at least 5 or 6 plus million in some of these counties that are completely unrepresented. Millions of people. So again, looking at projecting what they themselves are guilty of onto the right. You see that with the shutdown. You see with that with the redistricting. Trying to blame the left or trying to blame the right for what they themselves are doing. Now you look at illegal immigration. They're trying to cast onto us that, no, you hate the poor. You hate immigration. You hate brown people. You hate black people. You hate these people because you're refusing to help them. Yeah, and you can see how they try to spin a narrative, spin a story to make the right look evil, to make the right look bad, because we refuse to give out free handouts to illegals. It is America first. We want to take care of our own first before we take care of the rest of the world. But as we've said many times, they don't care about the illegals. They don't care about the rest of the world. All they care about is that they got a warm body that can vote for them, and trying to figure out how to get that warm body, even though it's illegal, voting for them. Because they know for a fact that many of these illegals have Social Security numbers, have driver's licenses. They're passing no ID laws in almost every single one of these blue states. They know for a fact that they're passing laws that make it illegal to ask if you're a citizen when you register to vote, and that all you have to provide is an ID, a driver's license. And they're giving out driver's licenses like crazy. I mean, we've seen how many commercial driver's licenses California alone has handed out. What they're saying is upwards of 45,000 commercial driver's licenses have been handed out to illegal aliens that are driving on our roads and killing people, literally killing people on our streets. Because they can't read the language, they don't know the laws, and they're getting commercial driver's licenses. If they're getting commercial driver's licenses and regular driver's licenses, you're asinine if you think that they're not voting. We look at a report that just came out by Ohio, the Attorney General of Ohio, where he has pulled thousands of illegal aliens off the voter registries. He specifically said, we have just got it started in cleaning the voter registries. But we have already found thousands of illegal illegals that have voted since 2017. Have voted. That's one state, and he just started. Imagine states that don't care if the illegals are voting and actually want them to vote, how bad the voter registries probably are in states like California, Illinois, New York. How bad is those voter polls or those voter registration logs? How much fraud is actually in those? Again, they're projecting onto us what they themselves are doing. They want power. They don't care about the illegals. They don't care about the Mexicans. They don't care about the Latino population. They want you subject to them, because that's what socialism brings. If we can get the entire population subject to the government, dependent on the government, it'll be that much easier to implement socialism, because we're already dependent on us. We can get this flipped on a dime. We can get more and more people dependent on the government. That's what they want. I mean, the more people they get dependent on the government, the easier it is for them to create socialism. And we got millions out there thinking that socialism is the answer, which is scary, because they have no idea what fascism is. They have no idea what true socialism is. I can't tell you how many people within my own comment section, well, we got Medicare, Medicaid, that's socialism. We got food stamps, that's socialism. That's not socialism. Those are steps towards socialism, but that is not true socialism. And the ignorance of what real socialism is astonishing. They have no idea what it is. They have no idea what Hitler really did, because they have not studied World War II. They have no idea what a king or a dictator really does, because they have not gone out of the bounds of their own community and actually looked at what a Maduro has done, or what a Stalin did, or what a Hitler did, or what's really going on in China. I had somebody today in my comment section start comparing the United States against China, and said China's is better because 90% of their population has homes, and we have people here that can't afford them. Well, we should just go communist then. Literally in my own comment section. Showing the ignorance level, but showing how effective what the left is doing and how well it is working. Because it is hook, line, and sinker their goal. It is what they've been pushing. They want to create such discord, such desperation, that people demand that they fix it. And the way they're going to fix it is socialism is communism. Look at Mom Donnie in New York. Out there fully saying, what are we going to have? Free buses, free health care, free child care, all this free stuff. Let's get more and more people. Let's get millions of people dependent on the government. That way we can click that button and just switch everything over to socialism. How they've pushed the narrative to where people literally just do not understand what true socialism is, or true fascism is, but yet they've painted such a beautiful picture around it and have made people so desperate through violence in the streets that people just want to get rid of, and through inflation that it's so bad that people just can't afford anything, and they're looking for something that has an immediate here and now fix. Not something that will gradually fix, like capitalism would gradually fix if we would actually get back to capitalism and reverse a lot of these policies that the Biden and Obama administrations put into place. A lot of these restrictions and regulations that they've created, which creates this environment where small businesses can't thrive and just the big businesses take over everything. I mean, we're looking now that even Target is struggling because of big companies like Walmart and Amazon, where it's so regulated that they can't compete naturally. Sears going out of business, all these others going out of business because they can't compete naturally. But yet every single time Trump says, well, let's drop the corporate taxes down, let's make it easier for businesses to thrive and hire people, the left gets up in uproar, and they get their entire base following them saying, no, you're giving tax breaks to the rich. All you care about is the billionaires. Because they create this stupid story that the billionaires are the only ones getting the benefits. And they call it a trickle-down effect, and they badmouth the trickle-down effect, not understanding that the people down the bottom are not the ones creating the jobs. They're not the ones creating the companies. They're not the ones that are supporting the economy. Now, if you were to go out and create your own business, you would be affected because the small businesses are affected even more than the big companies are. And there's a lot of small companies out there that have millionaire owners that they're bad-mouthing, but yet those millionaire owners struggle to put that business together and could be put out of business if government continues to regulate them as much as they want to. But yet again, that's their whole goal, because you can't have small businesses and have socialism. You can't do it. You can only have big companies that buy into your theology and will do what you tell them to do. Like we saw during the Biden administration when they started regulating free speech. We saw that on X, we saw it on Facebook, we saw it on Google. That's exactly what they want. Get rid of all the small businesses, control the big ones. That's the perfect plan right there, and it's working. And anytime that we try to help the people, the left twists that, saying, no, you're only helping billionaires. You're only trying to do a trickle-down effect. When it's not true. None of that is true, but yet that is the picture that they paint, and they believe it. And they believe it. Every ounce of it. And there's no convincing them that it's not true. Because they don't want to believe that it's not true, because they're so bought into hating conservatism, hating capitalism, and hating anything that has to do with Trump or the right. So bought into it. But going back to this projection. So you have the shutdown being projected onto the right. You have these ICE riots being projected on the right because they're trying to keep those illegals here in country. Whereas the right, we're trying to protect our own. We're trying to protect our veterans. We're trying to protect our elderly. We're trying to protect the poor that are actual U.S. citizens that are amongst us, and not supplement the entire world or allow the entire world to come here, because that will degrade and destroy our way of life, because they don't assimilate into Americanism. They don't have patriotism for this country. All they know is greed and money, and they don't have that understanding. And we covered that during our immigration episode. So they project upon us, saying that we're the ones that are violent against the illegals, when all they're doing is picking them and sending them back to their own country. That is not fascism. They're not getting thrown into internment camps. They're not getting thrown into slaughterhouses. They're not being put into gas chambers. They're not being enslaved and forced into labor camps where they work for barely to subsist. They're simply given money, a lot of them $500 to $1,000, and sent back to their own home country. That is not fascism. That is order. That is having a country. That is having borders. That is having sovereignty. And yet they still want to paint that as, no, you're the dictator, you're the fascist because you're picking them up and deporting them. I don't see the internment camps. I don't see the labor camps. I don't see the gas chambers. I don't see them being maltreated, even when they go to these holding facilities in Florida and other places. They got plenty of food. They got decent beds, better beds than our soldiers have in the barracks and our bases, better beds than people have in our prisons. And then they're immediately deported. The projection here is something else. But getting past that, the worst out of everything, the main thing I want to cover here, is the violence, the sheer violence that we're seeing. Again, the right, the leadership of the right, the Democrat leadership, they have such rhetoric that they want to skirt that line to where they're so close to just telling people to go out and shoot somebody. Say, hey, I need you to go out and shoot people. I need you to go out and kill people. I need you to go out and destroy property. Instead of blatantly saying things like that, they're skirting as close to that line as possible, so where they have plausible deniability when that violence actually happens, when it actually occurs. You see, they want to play the innocent game. They want to play, I didn't do this. I didn't create this. The right did. If they weren't out there trying to pick people up and deport them, then this wouldn't have happened. If they weren't putting National Guard into the streets to try to stop crime, to stop car thefts and murders, this wouldn't have happened. And you can see the stupidity of that reasoning, but yet they believe it. Their reasoning is completely skiwampus, where they really honestly think that that's the National Guard that's creating the murders and the violence that's caused in the streets, that it's their right as poor people to go out and steal stuff, to have home invasions, to steal cars. Why? Because we're poor and we need it. I have to have it. We've seen that argument multiple times, but somehow this violence gets created. And I want to show you a couple articles here that really pounds this home, that how bad the violence is getting, and is getting worse day by day. So a week and a half ago, Don Lemon was on an interview, and these were his comments. If you believe in the Second Amendment, if you believe in the Constitution, black people, brown people of all stripes, whether you're an Indian American or Mexican American, or whoever you are, go out in your place where you live and get a gun legally, get a license to carry it legally. Because when you have people knocking on your door and taking away without due process as a citizen, isn't that what the Second Amendment is written for? So all of a sudden, now we have a Second Amendment right? All of a sudden, they've bought into what we've been saying the entire time, that the Second Amendment is for tyranny? But yet, how careful he is with his words. Careful. So he skirts that line, skirts that lie, without openly saying something wrong. So instead of having a Second Amendment for hunting or for target practice, it's actually for tyranny. So when ICE shows up, and notice how he doesn't specifically say ICE or Border Patrol, he just says, when someone shows up to try to take you away without due process, you have the right to shoot and kill them. No, you don't have the right to shoot and kill them. U.S. citizens are not the ones being picked up and deported. You can't deport a U.S. citizen. So again, see how carefully they are to twist that, saying, no, they're all being deported. But yet then he twists it even further, because in the very, very next line, he says, nobody is illegal. It's only a misdemeanor to cross the border. Now, if you do it a number of times, then it becomes something else. But no, there's nowhere near the level of criminality. Still a crime, but not the high level of crime. We have degrees of criminality in this country, and what Donald Trump did is at the highest level of criminality, except for taking someone's life. How is that possible? So picking somebody up who is here illegally and deporting them back to their home country is next to murder? That is so bad that it's the only thing worse than that is killing somebody? And at the same time, he says, go get a gun so you can kill them? Go kill the ICE agents for doing the very same thing? Well, where's the logic here? Where's the reasoning here? They're not supposed to be here. They're illegal. Again, I don't see concentration camps. I don't see death squads. I don't see gas chambers. I see people are getting picked up, treated humanely, put into holding facilities, given food, and given money in their pockets when they get deported. So they have something to arrive with. But they're all getting deported. And that's tantamount to murder? To where they can just go get a gun and just start shooting back? But yet the important thing is, nobody is illegal. Nobody. So all these illegals aren't really illegal. You can go and defend yourself. That's what he's saying. So up here when he says, well, if you're a citizen, and he knows in his mind, well, citizens aren't really getting picked up, so I've got to twist this just a little bit further and skirt that line. Everybody's a citizen now. Everybody. If you got to this country and you only came across the border once and you haven't done it multiple times, you're not creating other crimes, you're a citizen. Congratulations. You have the right to defend yourself and go shoot yourself an ICE agent. That's what he's saying. Don't think he's not. Because again, they want to skirt the line just enough so where they do not have any blowback upon themselves. And they know what they're doing. They know where that blowback's going to come from. They know what the 24-hour news media cycle is going to do. They know what the people on the right are going to say about it. But they also know what their own constituency is going to do, their own base is going to do. And they're going to push that base to where that base creates the violence and actually goes out and acts out what they're trying to say. And then when they go out and actually do it, they can sit back and say, well, it's not our fault. We're going to project that onto the right and say, nope, they did it. They should have been doing this in the first place. Charlie Kirk shouldn't have been up there in front of audiences talking about this in the first place. He dug his own grave. How many times did we hear that? Those right protesters out there peacefully protesting, well, you shouldn't have been there in the first place. We're going to go out and shoot you as leftists. Should have been there. You parents that are screaming in school boards that, well, you deserve to be in jail. You're an extremist. Why? Because you're projecting or trying to push values onto us, your Christian values onto us, and we don't want them. So the very same thing that they are doing, of the removal of freedom, creating a fascist population, creating a socialist type population, throwing it upon the right when they themselves, that is exactly what they're doing. Exactly what they're doing. Similar thing about a week and a half ago, about the same time. Democrats had a unity dinner where they're throwing up massive signs that said 8647 or MAGA equals Nazi and a number of other signs. A lot of these leaders, these Democratic leaders in the Lenawi Democratic County, were taking pictures of themselves up in front of these signs, posting them up on Facebook. Do you not think that their citizenry is not saying this? Well, if their leadership is approving this, then we've got permission to go out and do it too. Let's go act out. And then they followed up with a rhetoric saying that you're nuts, you're fascist, you're the most dangerous thing that's happened to democracy ever. People need to get out in the streets. They literally give them permission to act out this violence. And then when they go do it, and they actually create the violence, oh, we don't promote violence at all. We're standing back from this. Until it gets out of the news cycle, then they're back to the same old games again. This is not just our national leadership, but this is local leadership down in our cities and our school boards everywhere. This evil violence from the left is becoming incredibly pervasive everywhere. We're seeing it everywhere. When you try to talk to somebody on the left, they can't talk. They don't have an argument. All they resort to is name calling, and when the name calling is enough, they start lashing out, smacking and hitting, throwing stuff. And it's going to become more and more violent until they're actually starting to shoot and kill people, which they did with Charlie, which they did during the Black Lives Matter movement. They shot, kill people. This is giving that permission. Again with another one. Texas Democrat vows to go across your neck. Makes it a slashing motion. If you hit me in the face, I'm not going to punch you back in your face. I'm going to go across your neck. Jones said out front, making slashing motion across her neck. We can go back and forth fighting each other's faces. You've got to hit hard enough where they won't come back, she continued. So again, just know, I mean, she made a slashing. Oh, that didn't mean anything. I wasn't really saying go out and kill somebody, but her base, as riled up as they are, and as much as they hear this over and over again, they will go out and act upon it, and they know that. They're expecting that. They're wanting that. So again, that's why they push that line just enough to where they can deny that they had any involvement in the violence, but when it happens, they're in the background going, yay, it worked. No, I'm not wrong. You'll see this pervasively everywhere. Everywhere this is occurring. And we have got to recognize it and call it out for what it is. Because if we don't recognize it and call it out for what it is, it's going to get worse faster. It's going to get worse fairly quickly anyway, because that's where the left is going, because they don't have any power. And the only way they can get that power back is by creating chaos in the streets, shutting down the government, and trying to prevent their voters from getting deported. I mean, that's the only way they can get this power. The other problem the left is having is, again, all the money that they've manipulated for last 40, 50 years from USAID and all these other government agencies that Trump is right now shutting down. All this money that went out to foreign programs that now can't come back to their own coffers. They're lacking the funds to fund these type of movements, which is another part of the government shutdown, is they not only want insurance and SNAP benefits going to illegal aliens, which it is, but they're trying to fund gay pride parades in Mogadishu and all these other things, and it's all fake. None of these foreign programs are real. They'll devote a little bit of money towards that to kind of legitimize the program, but we all know, and it's been proven, Doge proved this, that most of that money is filtering its way right back to Democrat pocketbooks, to their campaigns, to their personal pocketbooks, everything. They're being bought out and paid for. How else do you think that so many of these people go into office with barely any value to themselves, and within a couple of years they're multimillionaires? It's not just insider trading on the stock market. That's part of it, but it's not just insider trading. They are getting taxpayer dollars filtered back to their own pocketbooks consistently. They want all these programs done. All they have to do is call a deep state employee and say, I need you to create this program. Money's going to be in your bank account. We've filtered it over to you. Now they're losing all that, so the desperation is getting more and more pervasive. And from desperate people, it becomes violence. And so this violence is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But we on the right, I mean, those of us conservatives, the more we can call it out and more we can recognize it, the more we can get those swing voters in the middle to recognize it, the more peace we're probably going to have. The more we can stem off socialism, the destruction of our government as we know it, the destruction of our freedoms, the destruction of the Constitution as we know it. And again, don't believe the rhetoric that we're the ones destroying the Constitution, that it's Trump's being a king and a fascist. Don't believe the rhetoric, because they project what they themselves are doing. Anytime you see them say something or dispel something that you think is negative towards the right, look back at their own actions and say, okay, is this a projection? Is that what they themselves are doing? Because it probably is. Where is the evidence of the right actually doing that? Where's the evidence of Trump being a king? Deportations do not prove that he's a king. Tariffs are not proving that he is a king. Putting National Guard out into the streets and quelling violence and crime is not him being a king. That's not fascism. That's making our streets safe again. And those that are on the streets know that for a fact and recognize it for a fact. Those of us who are actually U.S. citizens and seeing the illegals deported and our streets cleaned up know this for a fact. There's a montage here that I want to show that shows really a lot of this violent rhetoric and how bad it really is getting.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represented extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Are they a threat to democracy? Yes. Are they going to take our rights away? Yes. Are they going to put people's lives in danger? Yes. Are they going to endanger the planet by not dealing with climate change? Yes. They're going to do all that.
Needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives. And unfortunately, there's plenty to go around.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
It's a danger. It's a genuine danger to American security.
What was outrageous 3 days ago is no longer on the front pages, even though it threatens the physical safety of so many people, particularly, as you point out, immigrants that he and Vance have decided to demonize. And I don't understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is.
President Biden has been clear-eyed about the threat that the former president represents to our democracy.
Trump is an existential threat to our democracy.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
This is what kicking the out of fascism looks like.
Comparing the tactics of Donald Trump to Mussolini and Hitler is a very legitimate thing.
We have a Timo Hitler in the White House right now.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
The thing we were all warning about for the last few years is not coming, it is here. We do now live in a country that has an authoritarian leader in charge. We have a consolidating dictatorship in our country.
And what we're seeing play out here is Donald Trump's promise to be a dictator on day one.
Trump has seemingly never met a dictator he doesn't like.
It's some real dictator type stuff.
The American people will have to decide that they are the last in the line of defense against Donald Trump and American fascists.
What is happening right now with this presidential attack on judges?
We live in a fascist dictatorship. That's what's happening right now. That's what it feels like. This is where we are.
You have to call a thing what it is and be definitional about it. The word MAGA doesn't mean anything other than if you go back, it's what fascists used to say.
I've been tweeting for over a year. Daily reminder, today's GOP is no longer a political movement. It is a fascist movement that has embraced white nationalism.
Here's the guy who said, stand back and stand by to the Proud Boys. Look at what he's doing last night, as you know, that more or less salutes that are either QAnon or almost look like Nazism.
I mean, you can see how the main base would just believe that because they hear fascism, he's a dictator, he's Hitlerish. I mean, Nancy Pelosi says it's not wrong to label him fascism and Hitler. Those statements aren't wrong. And it's just fascism, fascism, fascism over and over and over again. And they repeat the word so much that those that are on the left, they have no idea what real fascism even is. They believe the leadership. Why? Because they're their leadership. They should know. Then if they know, then that's what it is. And they believe it because they trust the leaders that they should not be trusting. They do not understand that this leadership does not care about them. All they care about is morphing this country into socialism and an actual dictatorship. Again, projecting onto the right what they themselves are doing. And many just don't understand what true fascism is. They don't understand what a dictator is. Openly saying repeatedly that Trump is the new dictator, that he's the new Mussolini, that he's the new Maduro. Again, point to what he is doing that is a dictatorship. And the only things they'll point to is, well, he's deporting illegals. He shouldn't be doing that. He shouldn't be going around picking them up. Well, he's putting National Guard in our streets. He's taking our rights away. No, he's stopping crime. What are you not able to do? I mean, has he stopped you from speaking out? Has he stopped your free speech rights? Is he taking down Twitter and Facebook? Is he going in and arresting all these news media and shutting down the news media? I don't see CNN shutting down. I don't see cops in MSNBC shutting them down. I don't see The View getting shut down. So is he literally just going out there and just arresting anybody that disagrees with him and deporting them to some random country? Or is it just illegal aliens that he's deporting? When he puts out National Guard, what is the National Guard actually doing except for just being a presence on the street? Because the National Guard aren't arresting anybody. They're not pulling anybody in. They don't have the authority to arrest anybody. They're just being a presence out on the street. And then they back up the police officer. When the police officers say, we're in danger, we're about ready to get overrun, they'll go in and back them up with a stronger presence. It's the same police officers within these streets that are doing the arresting and stopping the crime. It's just the presence of the National Guard in the streets that's preventing crime. They're not arresting anybody or taking anybody into custody. They're preventing it by just having a presence in the street. And it's working. They're helping investigations, helping in research stuff and finding out who the criminals are than giving that information to the police so they can go out and make those arrests. Show me anywhere where the National Guard is rounding up anybody and putting them in paddy wagons and you're never seeing them from them or hearing from them ever again. That all of a sudden people are just disappearing, like really happens in a fascist country. Look at what happened in Germany, where people just rounded up and from one day to the next they just disappeared. You never saw them again. That is not happening here. And again, don't point to the illegals, because people are seeing them again. They're just not seeing them in this country again. Big difference. They're still alive. They're still well. They're still fed. They still have money in their pockets. They're just no longer in this country. That is not what fascism is. Fascism and Hitlerism is where those people disappear and they're dead. They're put into some hidden grave and no one ever sees from them ever again. Big difference between fascism and what Trump is doing with the National Guard or with ICE and Border Patrol. Stop mixing the two, because it's not legitimate. You're delegitimizing what actually happened during World War II, what actually happened in the Holocaust. You're delegitimizing what Maduro did to his own people down in Venezuela. You're delegitimizing what's happened in Mussolini, in Italy, or what happened with Pinochet down in Chile, where people literally were just shot in the head in the streets in front of everybody. That's what happened in Venezuela. That's what happened in Chile during those dictatorships, during those socialistic times. And that was legitimate socialism. You have no idea what fascism is or socialism is if you keep comparing the right to that. Because that's not what it is. Stop comparing ICE and Border Patrol doing their job to enforce the law as fascism. Stop referring to the National Guard being in the streets and preventing crime for being fascism. Because again, they're not arresting anybody. They're not rounding people up. They're not shooting people in the streets. Get a grip upon your opinion, because you have no idea what fascism really is. But yet the leadership, as we saw in that montage, they know exactly what it is they're doing. Because again, they know there's a large portion of their base, 25% plus of them, that will go out there and act upon it and create this violence that they are looking forward to. Because it is that violence, it is that chaos combined with illegal immigration, combined with getting all these minorities dependent on the government, that'll eventually turn the gears of this country towards complete socialism and complete fascism, which is what they are. And it will turn into another Nazi Germany. They themselves are trying to get it to become a Nazi Germany. Again, projecting onto the right that we're doing what they themselves are doing in the very moment. It's evil personified. And the way they twist that narrative and they spin that narrative to make it look like those of us are conservative are doing it, when yet all we're doing is saying we want more freedoms, not less. We want less government, not more government. We want more free speech. We want more fair trade. We want more competition, not less. We don't want the bailouts. We don't want the free stuff given out to everybody. And yet in my comments section, that gets pointed out constantly. Well, what about this bailout? What about that bailout? What about these handouts or those handouts? Again, projecting that those of us on the right, we're the ones that put out all the bailouts, and we're the ones that create and give out all the free stuff. No. That was all done by left Congress, left Senate, left House. Look back at 2008 bailouts. You look at the COVID bailouts. Even though Trump was in office, that was all pushed by the left. We don't believe in free handouts. I hope those of us on the right really start calling this out and recognizing it for what it is. I hope those of you who are in the middle ground really start recognizing it for what it is. It is projection. They are doing it, not those of us on the right. It is not fascism. It is not Nazism. Even though they would love that you believe that and create that violence out in the streets. I mean, that is their sole goal. They don't care about you. They don't care about the illegals. They don't care about minorities. They don't care about any of it. All they care about is staying in power and doing whatever is necessary to maintain that power. And right now they don't have any. And the desperation is showing. Last clip, and then we'll end this for the day. So this is a hearing that the Judiciary Committee just had a few days ago, and Chad Wolf kind of goes through the statistics of how much violence is coming from the left, and these are real numbers are done in an open hearing. So watch this clip real quick.
Thank you, Chairman Schmidt, Ranking Member Welch, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today. Political speech and violence should never go hand in hand. I'm here today because I've seen this play out firsthand over the last several years, and certainly during my time in government service. Let me be clear. I support those who lawfully exercise their constitutional rights, but when speech turns to violence, we must hold those committing violence accountable. The increase in politically motivated violence over the last several years has been driven largely by radical left-wing extremist groups and individuals that believe violence is a legitimate means to achieve political goals. A recent analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies shows that, quote, left-wing violence has risen in the last 10 years, and left-wing incidents in 2025 are on track to reach 30-year highs. A recent Rutgers University poll found that 55%, over half of the respondents of left of center, said it would be somewhat justified to murder President Trump, and 48% said the same about Elon Musk. According to another recent poll, 1 in 4 people on the far left believe that violence can be justified. That is 1 in 4. The data paints a disturbing picture that some on the left, especially younger adults, are increasingly supportive of violence as a form of protest. In 2020, as acting Secretary of Homeland Security, I witnessed 100 consecutive nights of violence in Portland, Oregon. Every night, hundreds of violent anarchists surrounded the Hatfield Federal Courthouse. They hurled commercial-grade fireworks, sledgehammers, concretes, and even IEDs at our federal officers. They set fire, they vandalized property, and assaulted law enforcement. Their goal was not peaceful protest. It was destruction, coercion, and intimidation. At the time, I pleaded with local officials, including the governor and the mayor there in Portland, to help protect our officers, and time again, they refused to act. They chose politics over public safety. The result was more than 280 injuries to law enforcement officers and millions of dollars of damage to federal property and to local businesses. Back then, we saw public figures attacking federal law enforcement officers, calling them stormtroopers, Gestapo, and thugs. Comparing American law enforcement to Nazi Germany was irresponsible, reckless, and dangerous then, as it remains so today. Unfortunately, this disgusting rhetoric and behavior has only intensified. Once again, we're seeing violent attacks against law enforcement officers, and again, public figures are describing them as Nazis. The difference between 2020 and now, however, is that the Trump administration knows what to expect and is fighting aggressively to hold these violent offenders accountable. The administration has rightfully designated Antifa as domestic terrorists, has began a whole-of-government investigation into the financing and resourcing of this group, and has charged Antifa members with providing material support for terrorism. And despite what the mainstream media insists, groups like Antifa are not disorganized. They are increasingly organized, funded, and networked. They plan online, they operate anonymously, and execute in ways that make detection difficult. Make no mistake, their lack of structure is not a feature. It is a feature, not a bug. And it is designed to evade accountability and prosecution. Critics argue because they have no formal leadership, they shouldn't be treated as domestic terrorists. I believe this completely misses the point. This decentralized model mirrors what we have seen from jihadist networks, cyber criminals, and other criminal groups. Their lack of a hierarchy makes them more dangerous. This past summer, the American people witnessed multiple anti-fascist inspired attacks and threats on law enforcement, journalists, and civilians. This includes threats against ICE officers, other government officials, and even Attorney General Bondi just yesterday. Tragically, this also includes the sickening assassination of Charlie Kirk. I want to state this as plainly as I can. Enforcing immigration laws passed by Congress almost 60 years ago, is in no way, shape, or form fascism. Every sovereign nation has a right to choose who is allowed to legally enter the country. Throwing around words like fascist and Nazi not only cheapens history, but it fuels increasing hostility towards law enforcement, journalists, and ordinary citizens. The rise in political violence presents a grave threat to our constitutional order and rule of law. The federal government has a duty and a responsibility to respond. We must continue to give law enforcement the tools and the resources they need, allow ICE to operate safely in courthouses and jails across the country, increase penalties for those that dox federal officers, and expand joint task forces to dismantle. We owe it to the families who have lost loved ones, including Erica Kirk and others who continue to grieve, to ensure that their calls for accountability are answered and that our nation restores respect for law and order. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
And there you have it, just a simple speech given a few days ago where it points out the violence that was happening up in Portland and that local officials refused to do anything about it, anything. They wanted it to happen. Why? Because it creates a narrative that they want to create within the media cycle itself. And it helps them out. The riots, the violence, the chaos helps their cause, and it always has. We have to call that out because, again, when ICE and Border Patrol are doing their job, that is not fascism. When National Guard is out there putting out a presence in the community, that is not fascism. That is not a dictatorship. That is not signs of a king. That is law and order that we must have on our streets. That is keeping America safe. That is keeping our streets safe. Stop putting the two of those things together. It is abhorrent, it's wrong, and it is a downright lie. Recognize it for what it is. Hope this video helps, and we'll talk to everybody on the next video.